It's the magic hour of 5 o'clock, so I'm just going to get started. All right. So closing and tallying at the polls, arriving at by 7:45. And there's a lot of other closing tasks where we have wardens and clerks here on the call, then they will be delegating the tasks. So you want to report to the warden or the clerk if the warden's tied up with something else as you arrive. And so one of the things that needs to be done is totaling up the label books, because we're using electronic voter check-in. We don't have check-in books that are the paper check-in books, but if there's a problem with the electronic check-in, we may revert to them. So the voter, the tally sheet is the same regardless of what type of voter record you're tabulating. So this is tabulating how many labels are on each page, and then that information is carried over to the tally sheet. So that way, at the end of the night, we can look at, do we have the same number of labels in the label book as we have voters checked in using the electronic check-in? And does that match the ballots that we have on the ballot on the electronic tabulator? So removing ballots, the upper compartment, just as a reminder.
Pass the file up and then it's too big a file and you can't blow it. That's kind of weird. All right, yep. All right.
Sorry, I don't know if someone is.
I got home. You know. All right, bye-bye.
Okay, someone was on the phone. So removing ballots, the upper compartment contains ballots that did not go through the tabulator, so they need to be put into this upper compartment so that the entire ballot can be tabulated by hand. The ballots, when they go through the tabulator, they go into this bottom compartment. And for these ballots, all that's being done is looking for write-in notations. So for hand tallied ballots, what you will get is a yellow tally sheet, whatever ballots did not go through the machine, and then an envelope. And what you'll do is work in pairs. One person reads what's on the ballot, the other person records. And once you've finished with the tallying, the ballots go into the envelope, and the tally sheets go to the clerk, who's going to put them into a green pocket, because that has to go to my office so that I can actually update the election results based on the tallies. So it's important not to put the tally sheet into the envelope, with the envelope. The write-in tally sheet, what you get is the same, except that instead of a yellow tally sheet, you get a white tally sheet, and they're machine counted ballots. So the machine has counted the ovals. So all you're doing is looking at the additional notations, like a name written in on the write-in line.
What? What's here? Sorry.
It might be good if everyone can mute themselves.
Oh my gosh.
So ballot tallying, I can actually, I'm going to ask everyone to mute yourselves.
You're very welcome. Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Okay, so ballot tallying in a nutshell, you're working in pairs. One person reads, the other person records. You need to make sure which ballots you're looking at. Did they go through the machine or not? The machine being the electronic tabulator. And so it's really important to know the difference, because if you start counting for everything that's on the ballot and the machine has already counted them, you're actually double counting the ballot. And I can tell the type of tallying that you're doing if you mark the number of ballots at the top of the tally sheet here. For instance, this is for machine counted ballots. So this is just for write-ins. So I'm being told here that there are 2 ballots in this envelope. I'm not going to expect to find two votes for each office. Well, in this instance, we have 1 office that's being voted on, the school committee, and then the ballot question. So if it's a write-in, I'm not expecting to see information for everything that's on the ballot. There may be 1 write-in notation, for instance.
Harry, what happens if the person fills in an oval, but also does a write-in name? What happens to that ballot?
So what happens to that ballot actually is if it's a write-in, so if the tabulator already counted it and the person filled in an oval, then wrote in a name and didn't fill in an oval, then you have to look at that ballot. And if you can't tell voter intent, if they didn't underline exclamation point and cross out something, things happen, then what you're going to have to do is adjust the tally. And in that instance, you would put a -1 next to the candidate's name that the tabulator counted.
Yep.
Because it actually should have been a blank, because you can't tell voter intent. Okay, so this is a hand count tally sheet. So that means, so it was in the top compartment. So when you look at the ballot, how are you going to tally? So for school committee, it says vote for not more than 1. And they've filled in 2 ovals. So how would you record that on the tally sheet? You can't tell voter intent, but you also need to account for every choice or every office on the ballot. So for school committee, you would put a note under blanks because this counts as a blank. For question 1, an oval has been filled in, so that information is recorded. This did not go through the tabulator, so you always have to remind yourself. And this, while it looks, this is a white, it looks like a white piece of paper, it says yellow, and I put yellow there to remind myself to print them on yellow paper. So, and you can also see that all of the names are listed here. So the assumption is that someone's going to choose a name that appears on the ballot. That may not happen, but we're printing the names here because we know that this tally sheet is for ballots that didn't go through the machine. So it's possible that someone will have chosen one of these names and you don't have to write it again. For the write-in tally sheet, there are no names pre-printed here because we're assuming that you're not going to be writing these names in, that someone is going to give you additional information that the tabulator could not have seen. The tabulator can see the ovals and can see from the ovals that there's a write-in, but the tabulator cannot tell who the write-in was for. So that's all you're providing. You're providing the name and you're putting a notation here. For the question, someone chose both yes and no. So the machine would already have picked up on this as an overvote. You don't need to add anything in. The risk of adding something in, even knowing that the machine picked it up, is that it can be counted again. So if this was added in, it could be counted as a second vote for a blank. Does that make sense to everyone? So how do you actually read the ballot? Meaning, how do you call out the vote? So for hand counts, the reader would say to the recorder, for school committee, 1 vote for, and then the candidate's name. It's very clear. And for question 1, 1 vote for, and then specify what the vote is for, yes or no. If no vote is indicated, then you would say for school committee or question 1, 1 blank. That way it's very clear. This is what we use if there's ever a recount. And so it's easy just to be consistent with that. For write-ins, the reader is only calling out handwritten names or notations. So they would say for school committee, 1 write-in for John Smith. Or for school committee, someone has drawn an arrow for this candidate that may be printed, in which case you'd have to write the name of the candidate on the tally sheet. So you're just recording additional information when you're doing the write-ins for what the tabulator did not pick up on. So the standard for counting write-ins, this is from the Secretary of State's office. So some people run sticker campaigns. We haven't heard of anyone running a write-in or sticker campaign, so we're not anticipating that, but someone can write in a name. They don't have to include the address. They don't even have to get the spelling right. So if there is a name there, then that name needs to be recorded on the tally sheet. So, and the oval does not have to be filled in.
Kari, I have a question.
Yes,
How is the ballot name sequence chosen?
it's alphabetical.
Always?
For town elections, it would be incumbents are named first. So incumbents are named first alphabetically, and then it's alphabetical.
Thanks.
Sure. So the tallying process, if a mistake is made, then a circle is placed around, because you're using pens on the tally sheet. So rather than scratching things out, it's clearer to just put a circle around the error. So in the instance where the oval has been filled in that someone mentioned before, and the voter has also handwritten a name, then this one should actually be where it says vote for not more than 2 and 3 are there instead of a -1. Well, it should be a -1 for each candidate because it's not clear which 2 of these 3 were chosen. So this should actually count as 2 blanks. These situations don't come up that often, but it's good just to have a frame of reference. And it's also something that the warden or clerk, if they're not certain, you should call them over if you're not certain of something, but they may also call us because sometimes unusual things happen in how people are marking their ballots. Is everyone clear on this?
Would you
Okay.
include the John Smith, the handwritten name in? on your
No.
hand? No.
If
okay.
it was an overvote, then
Yeah.
you don't want to include any
Any of it. Okay.
information. Yeah, yep. So make sure, as reminders, make sure that you know what type of tallying you're doing. Always fill out the top of the tally sheet with your name and the number of ballots that you're tallying, and record the envelope information. So if it's for hand counts, it's H- and then the number of the envelope. This allows us, if there is a recount, to match up the tally sheet with the envelope. Sometimes there are multiple envelopes with ballots that are tallied. And if there's something where, you know, the wrong tally sheet was used, I may want to reach out to whoever the tallier is just to clarify, was it hand counts that you were tallying or was it write-ins? Because I'm not entirely sure. I have no opportunity to review those ballots. They are locked up. I cannot open those ballot envelopes. So I count on whatever you're recording to be the information that I am going to use to adjust the final tally. And the tally sheets never go into the envelopes with the ballots. The tally sheets go to the clerk. And the ballots are sealed inside the ballot envelopes. So for cleanup, we need help, taking down signs and packing up supplies and things so that they can be used again as much as possible. This is just a little reminder. We're using blue transfer cases for the voted and counted ballots and for the hand count and write-in ballots. A second ballot transfer case for unvoted, rejected, and spoiled ballots. The unused ballots will need to be counted. So there are a number of different tasks that you may be assigned at the end of the night. But everything needs to get packed up and things need to be packed up correctly, because these two locked transfer cases I cannot get into with an order from the Secretary of State's office. The backpack that has the label books and the paper check-in and check-out backup books, there's a red provisional ballot pouch that contains ballots, but these ballots have not been tabulated at the polls, so that this is a situation where I have to actually do a little research before we can determine whether the ballot can be counted or not. So they need to go into the backpack. The wardens, they have a zip case that has the thumb drive that is taken out of the electronic tabulator that has to go into the locked backpack. And these things are all election evidence, which is why they have to be locked, and they're delivered by the police back to the townhouse. And then there's a large blue supply case that does not need to be locked. It's more square and bigger than the red ones that we've used. And hopefully that will help to get things all packed up neatly so that we can reuse them. And that is it. Let me stop sharing the screen and ask if there are any questions about this process. No? Okay. Well, I will have this recording available. I have the checker recording done. I have to figure out what to do. Maybe I'll just re-record or record the warden and clerk training, and I'll have all those things available on our webpage for election workers. All right, so thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the snow day.
Bye-bye, Kari.
I appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Yes,
Thanks for
thank
doing
you.
this.
Thank you. Bye-bye.